My name is Samuel Harlan. I'm 67 years old, and for most of my life, I built things that other people leaned on without thinking twice. Tables, cabinets, staircases that didn't creak when you stepped on them at 2:11 a.m. That kind of work. The quiet kind, the kind nobody notices unless it fails. I still carry the same Stanley PowerLock tape measure I bought in 1989, 25 feet. The metal edge is worn down on one side from years of snapping it back too fast. I used it to measure the crib I made for my son Daniel when he was born. Oak wood, hand sanded. I remember checking the spacing between the slats 3 times because I didn't trust factory standards. I trusted my hands. That was 34 years ago. Last Thanksgiving, Daniel looked at me across my own dining table and said, "Dad, you're outdated. You don't understand how things work anymore." He said it the way people say the weather is bad, casual, not angry, not even particularly emotional, just a statement. I remember the way his jaw moved when he said it, slow, controlled. Like he had rehearsed it in his head a few times before letting it out. I didn't say anything right away. That's something people misunderstand about me. Silence isn't confusion, it's inventory. I picked up my fork, cut into the turkey I had spent 6 hours preparing, and I chewed slowly. The room felt different after that sentence. Not louder, not quieter either, just rearranged. Across from Daniel sat his wife, Claire. She didn't look at me. She adjusted her napkin instead. Smooth movements. Careful. Like she didn't want to get involved, but also didn't want to stop what was happening. And then Daniel added, "I mean, you still think everything needs to be written down. Nobody does that anymore. Everything's digital now." I nodded once. I measured twice. I said, mostly to myself, I cut once. He gave a short laugh. Not mean, but not respectful either. "That's exactly what I mean," he said. "That kind of thinking doesn't scale anymore." I almost smiled. Almost. Because here's the thing, when someone tells you who they think you are, they're also telling you what they don't see. And Daniel didn't see much anymore. If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you genuinely. I live in a brick house on a quiet street in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, West End. There's a maple tree out front that drops leaves like it's keeping time with something only it can hear. The porch creaks on the 3rd step if you don't shift your weight just right. I never fix that. I like knowing where people are when they walk in. Daniel grew up in that house. Every door frame has a pencil mark where I measured his height over the years. 8 years old, he hit 4 feet exactly. I remember because he insisted we celebrate with pancakes for dinner. Said it felt illegal enough to be fun. He used to follow me around the workshop in the garage, asking questions about everything. Why this wood? Why that screw? Why not just buy it from the store? I tell him the same thing every time. Because when you make it yourself, you know what it can carry. I meant weight. Responsibility, time. I don't think he heard that part. Now he runs something he calls a growth-focused real estate venture. That's what his website says. Clean fonts, smiling photos, numbers that look impressive if you don't ask where they come from. He moved out 5 years ago into a house across town, new build, white exterior, big windows. Everything symmetrical in a way that feels assembled, like it came out of a catalog instead of a life. Claire handles the branding side, from what I understand. Social media, client-facing communication, she's good at it. I'll give her that. She can make anything look like it belongs. The first time I noticed something off was about 8 months ago. Daniel asked if I still had the original deed documents for this house. Not a copy, the originals. I remember exactly where I was when he asked. Standing in the kitchen, 6:43 p.m., stirring a pot of soup that had been going for about 40 minutes. He walked in like it was a normal question. Hey Dad, do you still have the original paperwork for the house, like the deed and stuff? Something in my stomach shifted. I didn't know it yet, but that was the first red flag. Why? I asked. He shrugged. Too quickly. Just organizing some things. Thinking long term. Estate planning. I've done enough work with property over the years to know when a question doesn't match its answer. I said everything's where it's always been, which was true. He nodded, smiled a little, and changed the subject. Asked about the maple tree, asked if I ever thought about selling the place, casual things, surface level, but his hand rested on the back of a chair the whole time, fingers tapping lightly, rhythm off. Not relaxed, I noticed hands. It's part of the job. That night, after he left, I went down to the basement. There's a cabinet down there. Steel. Heavy. Bought it secondhand in 1996 from a closing office supply store. The lock sticks if you don't turn it just right. I opened it and pulled out the folder labeled property. Inside were documents going back decades. Deeds, tax records, insurance updates, notes written in my own handwriting from years I barely remember clearly. I sat on the concrete floor for a while, just looking. People think paper is outdated. Paper doesn't glitch. It doesn't get updated without leaving a trace. It waits. 2 days later, I called Marcus Bell. Marcus and I go back to 1981. First job site we worked together, we mismeasured a kitchen counter by half an inch. Half an inch doesn't sound like much until you try to fit something into a space that doesn't forgive mistakes. We redid the entire thing for free. He still brings it up. Half an inch, Sam, he said when he picked up the phone. Cost us 3 weekends and a marriage I almost had. That marriage didn't end because of a countertop, I told him. It didn't help, he said. Then, what's going on? Marcus has a way of hearing what you're not saying. I told him about the question, the deed, the way Daniel asked. There was a pause on the line. Has he been doing any work on the house? Marcus asked, no. Any appraisals, inspectors coming by? Not that I've seen. Another pause. Longer this time. Sam, he said, people don't ask about original deeds unless they're planning to use them for something. You don't organize that kind of document without a reason. I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking under me. Same chair I've had since 2003. Fixed it twice. Still holds. I figured. I said, what are you going to do? I looked at the tape measure sitting on the table. I had taken it out without realizing. Habit, I guess. I pressed the button and let the tape slide out. 10 inches. 12. 15. I'm going to watch, I said. Marcus chuckled, low and knowing. That's what I was hoping you'd say. Because here's the thing, cleverness is fast. What I do is slow. And slow doesn't mean late, it means precise. Over the next few weeks, I paid attention to things I might have ignored before. Mail that came in Daniel's name but addressed to my house. Calls that he took outside instead of in the living room. The way Claire started asking more questions about the property when she visited. Such a great location, she said one afternoon, standing by the window. You could do a lot with land like this. You can do a lot with anything, I said. She smiled, polite, practiced, but her hand was still on the glass longer than it needed to be. Then, one evening, Marcus showed up unannounced. He does that. I opened the door, heard the third step creak under his weight, and knew it was him before I saw his face. Got a minute? He asked. I usually do, I said. He walked in, took off his jacket, and sat at the kitchen table like he owned the place, which in a way he had helped build pieces of. I ran into someone at the county office, he said. Old contact. We got to talking. I poured 2 cups of coffee. Black. No sugar. Same as always. And? I asked. Marcus looked at me for a second. Not rushed, not dramatic. Your address came up, he said. I didn't react. Apparently, he continued, there's been some recent interest in the property. Informal inquiries. Nothing filed yet, but someone's been asking questions. Who? He shrugged. Didn't get a name, but the timing? He let that hang in the air. The silence sat between us like a fifth guest. I took a sip of coffee. It had gone slightly bitter. I hadn't timed it right. That's interesting, I said. Marcus leaned forward, elbows on the table. Sam, I don't think this is just curiosity. I think he's planning something, and I think he believes you won't notice until it's already in motion. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I said. I think so too. And trust me, when someone underestimates you like that, it tells you exactly how far ahead you can get before they even realize there's a game. I stood up, walked to the drawer by the sink, and pulled out a small notebook, spiral bound, blue cover. Bought it in 2014. I flipped it open to a blank page. What are you doing? Marcus asked. I clicked a pen. I'm starting to measure, I said, because I didn't know everything yet. But I knew enough to understand one thing. Daniel thought I was outdated, and I was about to let him keep thinking that. I started writing things down that night. Not big conclusions, just small facts. Dates, times, little shifts in behavior that didn't look like much on their own. You'd be surprised how often the truth hides in details that don't raise their voice. November 14th, 3:22 p.m. Daniel stopped by unannounced, stayed exactly 26 minutes, took a call outside, said the word timeline 3 times. November 18th. Envelope addressed to him. My house. No return address. Inside blank paperwork. Just headings. Legal formatting. No signatures. November 21st. Claire asked again about the property taxes. Not how much. When they were last updated. I don't rush patterns. I let them show themselves. You know what I did? I laughed. Not out loud. Just a quiet thing. Sitting there at the table with my pen in my hand. Because for someone who thought I didn't understand how things work anymore, Daniel was being remarkably predictable. 3 weeks after that dinner, he invited me to his house. Just a small thing, he said over the phone. Claire's idea. We haven't had you over in a while. I said yes. Of course I said yes. The house was exactly how I remembered. White walls, open space, everything arranged like it was waiting to be photographed. Even the fruit bowl looked rehearsed. Claire greeted me at the door, smile in place, voice warm. Samuel, we're so glad you came. I live 10 minutes away, I said. It's not a pilgrimage. She laughed. A little too long. Daniel came out from the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, holding a glass of something amber. He handed it to me. Good to see you, Dad. Yeah, I said. It is. We sat, talked about nothing for a while. Weather, traffic, some story about a client who wanted to flip a property in less than 30 days. And then eventually the conversation turned. It always does. So, Daniel said, leaning back in his chair, one arm stretched across it like he owned the air around him. Claire and I have been thinking about expansion. I nodded. Real estate? I asked. Yeah, but bigger, more strategic. We're looking at consolidating a few assets, creating leverage. He liked those words, you could tell. They made him feel like he was already where he wanted to be. Claire jumped in smoothly. We've built a lot of momentum this past year. The numbers are strong. I didn't ask which numbers. And we realized, Daniel continued, there's an opportunity we've been overlooking. He looked at me then direct. The house. I took a sip of the drink. Bourbon. Decent, not great. What about it? I asked. Well, he said, it's underutilized. The location alone could support a much higher value structure. Multi-unit maybe. Or short-term rentals. We've run projections. Of course they had. Claire reached for a folder on the table, clean, white, edges sharp. She slid it toward me. Just something for you to look at, she said. No pressure. I didn't touch it right away. I looked at Daniel instead. His jaw was doing that thing again. Slow grind. Controlled. Open it, he said. So I did. Inside were diagrams, plans, financial projections, words like optimization and yield potential printed in confident fonts. And then about halfway through, a page with legal language. I recognized the format immediately. Transfer of ownership structure, not a suggestion. A path. I closed the folder. That's thorough, I said. Claire smiled. We wanted to be prepared. Daniel leaned forward now, elbows on the table. Dad, this is a win for everyone. You don't need the whole property anymore. It's just you. We could turn it into something that actually works. Actually works. I let that sit for a second. I've been here 38 years, I said. It's been working fine. He exhaled through his nose. Not angry. Frustrated. That's what I mean, he said. You're thinking in terms of living. We're thinking in terms of growth. There it was again. That separation. Like we were operating on different timelines. Growth requires risk, I said. Exactly, he said, like I had finally caught up. And control, I added. He paused. Yeah, he said. Control too. I nodded once. Who controls this? I asked, tapping the folder lightly. Claire answered before he could. It would be structured under our company, but with provisions to ensure your comfort. You'd still have a place there, of course. A place, not the place. I almost smiled. Almost. And the deed? I asked. Daniel leaned back again. We'd need to transition it. Yeah. That's why I asked about the original documents. There it was. Out in the open now. I closed the folder again and placed it neatly on the table. Let me think about it, I said. Daniel's shoulders relaxed just a fraction. He thought that was movement. Of course, he said. Take your time. I stood up. Dinner was good, I added. Claire walked me to the door, polite, gracious. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard Daniel say something behind me, low voice. I didn't catch the words, didn't need to. The air outside felt different, cooler, cleaner. I got into my truck, a 2002 Ford F-150 with 184,000 miles and a dent on the rear bumper from a job site in '09, and I sat there for a while. Engine off, hands on the wheel. I counted the distance from the steering wheel to the dashboard, 8 inches. I do that sometimes when I'm thinking, here's the thing, when someone hands you a plan that benefits them more than you, they've already decided what role you play in their version of the story. And in this one, I was the obstacle. Or worse, the asset. The next morning, I called Evelyn Price. Marcus had mentioned her years ago, said she was the kind of lawyer who doesn't waste your time pretending things are complicated when they're not. She picked up on the second ring. Evelyn Price. My name is Samuel Harlan, I said. I was told you might be able to help me understand something. I can try, she said, voice steady, no extra words. I explained the situation. Not everything, just enough. She listened, didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was a brief silence. Then she said, do you still hold the deed in your name? Yes. Is there any existing trust structure attached to the property? No. Has anyone else had access to the original documents? No. Another pause. Good, she said. I almost smiled. Mr. Harlan, she continued, based on what you've described, there's no immediate risk of transfer without your explicit consent. However, she let that word sit. However, I asked, people who prepare documents, like the ones you saw, are rarely operating on a single-step plan. There may be additional elements you haven't been shown yet. I leaned back in my chair. That's what I figured, I said. I'd recommend we meet, she said, in person, Bring everything you have, every document, every note. I've been writing things down, I said. Good, she replied. Keep doing that. We set a time for Thursday, 10 a.m. When I hung up, I looked at the notebook on the table. The blue cover had a small crease now, near the edge. I opened it, added a new line. December 2nd, 9:14 a.m. Contacted legal counsel because I didn't know the full shape of what Daniel was building, but I knew this. He thought I was behind, and I was about to let him build as much confidence as he needed. That's the part people don't understand. You don't stop someone the moment you see the problem. You let them believe there isn't one. Marcus came by later that afternoon. You talked to her? He asked, dropping into the same chair as always. Yeah, I said. And? I tapped the notebook. We're measuring, I told him. He nodded slowly. Good, he said. We sat there for a while. No rush. Just the sound of the clock on the wall ticking like it had somewhere important to be. After a few minutes, Marcus said, You okay? I thought about that. I sat in my car for a while last night, I said. He didn't push further. He knows that's how I answer when things matter. All right, he said. And then, quieter. Just remember, he's your son. I nodded. I know, I said. That was the hardest part. Not the plan, not the documents, not even the betrayal. It was the fact that I still remembered the kid who wanted pancakes for dinner because it felt like breaking the rules. And now he was writing new ones. I closed the notebook, set the pen down, and for the first time since this started, I felt something settle into place. Not anger, not fear, something steadier. Because whatever Daniel thought he was building, he hadn't measured the foundation. Thursday morning, 10 a.m., I was sitting across from Evelyn Price in an office that smelled faintly of paper and lemon cleaner. Not in a bad way, just precise. Everything in that room had a place, and everything in its place felt like it had been there for a reason. I brought a box, not a folder, a box, steel gray, about 14 inches wide, 8 inches deep. The kind you don't carry unless you expect weight to matter. Evelyn noticed that before she noticed me. That's encouraging, she said, gesturing toward it. I don't like guessing, I replied. She nodded once. Good. We didn't waste time with small talk. I opened the box, laid out documents one by one across her desk. Deeds, tax records from 2001, 2008, 2016, insurance updates, handwritten notes with dates in the margins, receipts, old letters. She moved through them like someone reading a language she'd been fluent in for a long time. No drama, no reaction, just attention. At one point she stopped, held up a document. Where did you get this? She asked. Filed it myself, I said. 2013. She adjusted her glasses slightly. You restructured part of the property classification here. I did. Why? I shrugged. Taxes didn't make sense the way they were set up. That wasn't the full answer, but it was enough. She looked at me for a second longer than necessary, then nodded. Smart, she said. You know what I did? I almost smiled. Almost. She kept going. 10 minutes, 20, 30. Then she leaned back, hands folded. All right, she said, here's what you have. She tapped the stack lightly. Complete control. I didn't react. Not just ownership, she continued. Control. The way you filed in 2013 created a structure that makes partial transfer complicated. Very complicated. I let that settle. Meaning? I asked. Meaning, she said, any attempt to move this property into a corporate structure without your direct, informed consent would trigger multiple legal flags. And if someone tried to misrepresent that consent, she paused. That would be a problem for them. There it was, not loud, but clear. I nodded once. And if I wanted to let them proceed, I asked. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. You're asking if you can allow them to reveal their intentions fully before you act. Yes. She considered that. You could, she said, but I'd advise caution. Documentation matters. Timing matters more. I tapped the notebook I had brought with me. I've been keeping track, I said. She glanced at it. Good, she said again. Then, after a beat, keep doing that. We spent the next hour going over scenarios, not hypotheticals, real paths. What could be filed, what couldn't, what signatures would be required, what language to watch for. At 11:47 a.m., she said something that stayed with me. Mr. Harlan, people who think others are outdated often assume they're not paying attention. I nodded. That assumption, she added, is where most of the mistakes happen. I closed the box, paid her, scheduled a follow-up, and walked out feeling not better, just clearer. Clarity is underrated. It doesn't feel good, but it holds. When I got home, there was an envelope waiting in the mailbox, no return address. Same as before. I brought it inside, set it on the kitchen table, didn't open it right away. I poured a cup of coffee first. Black. Let it sit for exactly 4 minutes this time. Not 3, not 5. Then I opened the envelope. Inside were updated documents, more polished than the last set, more complete. And this time, there was a signature line. My name printed neatly beneath it. Samuel Harlan. Waiting. I ran my thumb along the edge of the paper. Smooth. New. There's a certain confidence in sending something like that before it's been agreed to. It assumes momentum. I sat down, looked at the documents for a long time. Then I reached for the notebook. December 7th, 12:32 p.m. Received formal transfer documents. Signature requested. I underlined requested because words matter. Later that evening, Daniel called. Hey, Dad, he said, just checking in. You get the updated plans? I did, I said. And I leaned back in my chair, the same chair, still holding. I'm reviewing them, I said. A pause. Not long, but there. Okay, he said. Just let me know if you have questions. I will. Another pause. Then, we're moving pretty fast on this, so I know, I said, cutting in gently. Silence on the line. Then, quieter. Right. We hung up. I set the phone down and stared at the wall for a bit. There's a small mark near the corner where I missed a nail back in 2005. Never patched it. Didn't see the point. Marcus came by again the next day. He didn't knock this time. Just opened the door and stepped in. Third step creaked. Got something for you, he said, holding up a folded sheet of paper. What is it? I asked. Pulled a favor, he said. County office. He handed it to me. I unfolded it. It was a preliminary filing draft. Not official, but close. And there, in the header, was the name of Daniel's company, along with a proposed development plan for my address. Timeline included aggressive. Too aggressive. I looked at Marcus. He's already drafting filings, I said. Marcus nodded. Yeah, he said. And if I had to guess, he thinks your signature is just a matter of time. I exhaled slowly. Yeah, I said. Because here's the thing, confidence built on assumption is like a chair with one leg slightly shorter than the others. It holds until it doesn't. I folded the paper, set it next to the envelope. Then I did something I hadn't done yet. I called Daniel. He picked up on the second ring. Hey, I'll sign, I said. Silence. Then sharp. What? I said, I'll sign, I repeated. Another pause. Longer this time. You're serious? He asked. I don't joke about paperwork, I said. I could hear something shift on his end. Not just relief, Momentum. That's great, Dad, he said. That's really great. I'll come by tomorrow, I added. We'll go through it together. Yeah, he said quickly. Yeah, that works. We hung up. I sat there for a moment. Marcus was watching me. You sure about this? He asked. I looked at the documents on the table, the envelope, the draft filing, my notebook. I'm sure, I said. He leaned back. All right, he said. Then we do it your way. I nodded. Because this was the point where most people act them, raise their voice, call things out, try to stop the fall before it starts. That's not what I do. I measure. And sometimes you let someone build just enough height so the truth has somewhere to land. If you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, it really helps if you hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it's what keeps this whole thing running. So thank you for real. That night, I took out the Stanley tape measure again, pressed the button, let it slide out, 20 inches, 24. I held it there for a second, then let it snap back. Clean, controlled. Because tomorrow I wasn't just going to sign a document. I was going to let my son believe something that wasn't true. And that belief was going to cost him everything he thought he understood. The next day, I drove over at 9:58 a.m. I don't arrive early. I don't arrive late. I arrive when I said I would. Daniel opened the door before I knocked, like he had been standing there listening for the truck. His smile was already in place, a little too quick, a little too wide. Hey, Dad, he said. Come in. I stepped inside. Same clean lines, same staged stillness. The dining table had been cleared, replaced with a neat stack of documents, 2 pens laid parallel like they'd been measured. Claire stood near the kitchen island, phone face down, posture straight. Good morning, Samuel. Morning, I said. We sat. Daniel took the chair across from me. Claire stayed to the side, angled just enough to see everything without being directly in it. The room felt like a meeting that had been rehearsed. Daniel slid the top document toward me. We went through everything again last night, simplified some of the language. It's pretty straightforward now. I didn't touch it yet. Walk me through it, I said. He nodded, leaned in, and began. So this first section establishes the transfer into the holding entity. That lets us leverage the property properly, refinance, develop all of that. You still have residency rights, of course. A place, I said. He hesitated. Yeah, a place. Claire stepped in, smooth. A permanent residence clause, Samuel. You'd be protected. Protected. I let that word sit for a second. And control? I asked. Daniel tapped the page. Operational control sits with the company. That's how we scale this. It's standard. Standard for who, I thought, but didn't say. I picked up the first page. The paper was heavier than usual, like they wanted it to feel important. I read slowly, not scanning, reading, line by line. I've always believed you can hear the intention in the spaces between words if you give it time. You've included a clause for debt instruments, I said. Daniel's jaw did that slow grinding thing again. Yeah. It allows us to move quickly when opportunities come up. And collateral? The property backs it, he said. That's the point. I nodded once. Claire watched my hands. People who handle presentation always watch hands. They know that's where decisions show up before words do. I turned a page, then another. I paused at a section halfway through, tapped it lightly. This part, I said, ties the transfer to a future filing. Daniel leaned forward. Right. That's just sequencing. Nothing happens until everything is in place. I looked up at him. Everything, he echoed. I held his gaze for a second longer than necessary. Then I set the pages down neatly. Okay, I said. That one word changed the room. Daniel exhaled, shoulders dropping a fraction. Claire's fingers relaxed against the counter. The silence shifted from tight to expectant. Okay, Daniel said. Okay, I repeated. He almost laughed. Not out loud, you could see it in his chest the way count relief moves before it becomes sound. I reached into my jacket and took out my glasses. Old pair, scratched on the left lens. I put them on, leaned over the document, and picked up one of the pens. I didn't rush. I never rushed this part. My hand hovered above the signature line. Samuel Harlan, printed in clean, confident letters. Before I sign, I said, not looking up, I want to be clear on one thing. Of course, Daniel said quickly. If something goes wrong, I continued, if the market shifts, if a project doesn't land the way you expect, what happens? Daniel didn't hesitate. We manage it. That's what we do. With what? I asked. Our structure, he said. Our planning. And if that's not enough? He leaned back a little defensive now. Dad, we've run the numbers. This isn't a gamble. I nodded slowly. Everything is a gamble, I said. Some just look better on paper. Claire stepped forward then, voice calm. Samuel, we wouldn't bring this to you if we weren't confident. This is about growth, about building something bigger. I looked at her. Really looked this time. Bigger than what? I asked. She paused. Just a beat. Bigger than where it is now, she said. I almost smiled. Almost. I set the pen down. All right, I said. Let's do this. Daniel leaned in, eyes on my hand. I turned the page. Not to the signature line, to the section he had mentioned earlier. The future filing. I tapped it once. You said nothing happens until everything is in place. I said. Right, he said. So let's put everything in place, I replied. He frowned slightly. What do you mean? I reached into my jacket again. This time I pulled out a thin envelope, manila. Edges worn from being handled, not displayed. I placed it on the table between us. I brought something, I said. Daniel glanced at it, then back at me. What is that? Documentation, I said. Claire's posture changed. Subtle, but there. The kind of shift you see in someone who suddenly realizes the script might not be the only one in the room. Open it, I said. Daniel hesitated, then reached forward and pulled the contents out. Several pages, older, not polished, but official. His eyes moved quickly at first, then slower. His jaw stopped moving. What is this? He asked. That, I said, is the filing I made in 2013. Claire stepped closer, looking over his shoulder. It shows the property classification, I continued, and the control structure attached to it. Daniel flipped a page, then another. This complicates the transfer, he said, voice tightening. It does, I agreed. He looked up at me now, really looked. Why didn't you mention this before? He asked. I folded my hands on the table. You didn't ask, I said. The silence had weight now, not awkward, not loud, just heavy, like a beam set into place. Claire reached for one of the pages, scanning it quickly. Her expression didn't change much, but her hand froze halfway through turning the paper. This creates a layered ownership condition, she said quietly. Any transfer would require explicit consent. I finished, informed, documented. Daniel sat back slowly. So we just adjust it, he said. We update the structure. I shook my head once. Not without triggering a review, I said, and not without bringing in outside oversight. From who? He asked. County, I said. State, depending on how you file. He stared at me. You knew, he said. I suspected, I replied. For how long? I didn't answer that directly. I measure things, I said. You know that. He let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. This doesn't make sense, he said. Why would you set it up like this? I leaned forward slightly. Because I built this house, I said, and I wanted to make sure it stayed exactly where I put it. Claire looked at me then, not at the documents, not at Daniel, at me. You're saying we can't do this, she said. I held up one hand. Just one. I'm saying, I replied, calm even, that you can't do it the way you planned. Daniel's eyes flicked between me and the papers. So what now? He asked. I picked up the pen again, turned it once between my fingers. Old habit. Now, I said, we talk about what you were actually trying to do. Used it, his mouth, then closed it. Claire stepped back, arms crossing lightly. The room felt smaller now. Not physically, just less certain. I set the pen down again. I didn't raise my voice, I said. I didn't need to. Nobody said anything for a while. Outside, a car passed. The sound of it faded quickly. Inside, the truth settled. And I could see it in Daniel's face the moment the confidence started to crack. Not collapse, not yet, just shift. Because the plan he thought he was in control of wasn't the only one at the table. Daniel didn't speak for a long time after that. Not the kind of silence people use to think of what to say next. The other kind, the one where something in the back of your mind is trying to rearrange itself and failing. Claire was the first to move. She gathered the pages into a tighter stack, aligning the edges with slow, careful taps against the table. A small thing, but it told me everything I needed to know. She was buying time, rebuilding structure where she could. We didn't intend to do anything improper, she said finally. Calm voice. Measured. I looked at her. I didn't say you did, I replied. Daniel let out a breath through his nose. Sharper this time. Then what are you saying? I leaned back in my chair, not relaxed, just settled. I'm saying, I began, that you came to me with a finished plan, not a conversation. That's how this works, he shot back. You bring a plan. You refine it. You refine it with the person who owns the thing, I said. Before it's finished. He looked down at the documents again. His fingers tapped once against the paper, then stopped. You could have just said no, he muttered. I nodded. I could have. Then why didn't you? I watched him for a second. Not the man across the table. The kid behind him. The one who used to stand in my workshop, asking why I didn't just buy things from the store. Because no doesn't teach you anything, I said. It just stops you. Claire exhaled softly. Not agreement, not disagreement, just acknowledgement. Daniel leaned forward again, elbows on the table, hands clasped now. So what do you want? He asked. That's always the question, isn't it? I didn't answer right away. I picked up the Stanley tape measure from my pocket. I had slipped it in without thinking when I left the house and set it on the table between us. The metal edge caught the light for a second. Daniel looked at it confused. You remember this? I asked. He frowned slightly. You've had that forever. I used it to measure your crib, I said. Made sure the spacing was right so nothing could go wrong. He didn't respond. I measure things because I don't like surprises, I continued. Not the kind that cost people more than they think they're risking. Claire's eyes flicked to the tape measure, then back to me. This plan, I said, tapping the documents lightly, puts everything on one line. Property, debt, reputation. If it works, you grow. If it doesn't, I let that hang. Daniel swallowed. His jaw wasn't grinding anymore. You lose the house, I finished, and not just the house. He nodded once. Small. We calculated the risk, he said. I know, I replied. That's part of the problem. Because numbers can tell you what might happen. They don't tell you what it feels like when it does. I leaned forward. Just a little. I'm not signing this, I said. Not like this. The words didn't land like a hammer. They didn't need to. They just settled. Daniel closed his eyes for a second, opened them again. Okay, he said. Quiet. Different tone now. Then what? Claire didn't move this time. She was watching him. I reached into my jacket one more time and pulled out a single sheet of paper, thicker than the others. Not new, not old either, just used. I slid it across the table. This, I said, is what I'm willing to do. Daniel picked it up slowly, Claire leaned in. Their eyes moved across the page together this time. Not fast. Careful. This keeps the property in my name, Daniel read aloud. Establishes a limited partnership structure. Caps exposure. Claire continued under her breath. Requires independent oversight for any debt, phase development, performance, benchmarks. She stopped, looked up at me. This protects everything, she said. I nodded. It also limits growth, Daniel added. It limits damage, I corrected. He leaned back again, staring at the paper like it had just changed shape. This isn't what we planned, he said. No, I agreed. It's what you didn't plan for. Silence again. Different this time, less tension, more recalibration. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, something he used to do when he was stuck on homework. I hadn't seen it in years. You really think it could go that bad? He asked. I didn't answer right away. I looked around the room, the clean lines, the staged stillness, the life that looked assembled instead of built. I think, I said slowly, that you built something that works when everything goes right. He nodded slightly, and I continued, you forgot to build for when it doesn't. Claire lowered her eyes back to the paper, not avoiding, thinking. We could adjust, she said, rework the projections, phase it like this. Daniel didn't respond immediately. He was still looking at me, not with confidence, not with defiance, with something else, something closer to recognition. You were ahead the whole time, he said. I almost smiled, almost. I was paying attention, I replied. He let out a breath, long, slow. I thought you just didn't get it, he said. I don't get everything, I said, but I get enough. That's the truth most people miss. You don't need to understand every new system. You just need to understand what never changes. Risk, control, people. The waiter didn't appear this time. There was no interruption to break the moment. Just the three of us, sitting in a room that felt less certain than it had an hour ago. Daniel looked back down at the paper. If we do it this way, he started. You build slower, I said. You keep what you have. You learn as you go. And if we don't, he asked, I held his gaze, then you do it without this property, I said, without my name attached. He nodded again. Small, measured. Okay, he said. Just that. Okay. Claire looked at him, surprised for a second, then nodded as well. Okay, she echoed. I picked up the pen. Not the one they had laid out. Mine. Black ink. Slightly uneven flow. I like knowing when a pen has character. I signed the document I had brought. Slow, steady, Samuel Harlan. No hesitation. I slid it across the table. Daniel looked at it like it weighed more than the others. Because it did. Not in paper. In consequence, we didn't celebrate. There was no handshake, no moment of relief. Just a quiet shift. The kind that doesn't announce itself. When I stood to leave, Claire walked me to the door again. But this time, she didn't fill the space with polite conversation. She just said thank you, not for agreeing, for something else. I nodded. Take care of it, I said. I will, she replied. Outside, the air felt the same as it had the day before. Cool, clean. I got into my truck and sat there for a moment, engine off. Hands on the wheel, 8 inches to the dashboard, same as always. I thought about Daniel as a kid, pancakes for dinner. The way he used to measure things with me, holding the tape steady while I marked the wood. I thought about the way he said outdated, like it meant finished. And I thought about how easy it is to mistake quiet for absence. Some days I wonder if I did the right thing. Most days I know I did. That's enough. We're not the same as we were. We're careful now, more deliberate. We talk, not as much, but better. He asks questions, again, not the same ones, better ones. And me? I still measure things. The porch still creaks on the third step. The maple tree still drops its leaves like it's keeping time. And sometimes, late at night, I take out that old tape measure, let it slide out just far enough to feel the tension, then I let it snap back, clean, controlled, like it always has been. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this sphere.